education is central to any discussion on inclusive growth. It's increasingly clear that through the research that quality pre-K is key to increasing economic opportunities and promoting social mobility. Here in the city of Philadelphia, we are lucky enough to have a mayor who has not only recognized this, but has worked to ensure that children in their earliest days, children across Philadelphia, will have access to this vital educational resource. He has said, and I quote, "The single most important investment we can make is in pre-K." Mayor Jim Kenney has been a staunch advocate for universal pre-K here in the city, leading a charge that will transform access to quality pre-K education in a way that will level the playing field for families and invest in the long-term economic health of our city and our region. Before becoming our city's 99th mayor, James Kenney was a member of City Council as councilman at large, and throughout his career, he has worked to create a city and a city government that benefits everyone and every neighborhood, championing policies that benefit Philadelphia's working families, ranging from fighting for a real living wage, increasing funding for public education, and community policing measures. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Jim Kenney.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I don't even check the MacArthur Genius List to see if I'm one. It'll be the last place I'd look, I think. But congratulations. Being a genius is awesome. But thank you, and I wanted to amend your comment a little bit. It's not indirectly related to it, it's directly related to it. What we're going through in our country in policing and incarceration and in poverty is directly related to lack of education, lack of opportunity, and more importantly, lack of hope. So many of our communities have gotten to the point where their rec center's a mess, their school's a mess, their neighborhoods are dangerous, and these young people just don't find any hope in life. And that is something totally antithetical to what we were used to, regardless of our race or nationality. Growing up at our age, there was always hope. There was always hope you're going to be better off than your parents were, and that is no longer the case. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Philadelphia. I hope you're all enjoying your stay. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon to discuss a topic that I wrestle with every day as mayor. And may I just say that the mayors that are here, Mayor Redd and Mayor Gilbert, Mayor Warren, I was in council for 24 years, and I never understood the depth of the problems facing an individual mayor. Whether it's a strong mayor form of government or it's not, it is just things that just, if you are a human being and you actually feel things and you're sensitive to things, that 8-year-old boy caught in the crossfire breaks your heart and makes you cry. And if I ever, first of all, I would like to stop that from happening, but if I ever don't feel that way, it's time for me to walk. Because if you don't have sensitivity, then you can't do this job. And sometimes you have to keep that sensitivity in check because it really does eat you up. And I am where you are now, and I begin to understand just the gravity of these positions. Philadelphia has the highest poverty and deep poverty rates of the nation's 10 largest cities. So by necessity, transforming our economy has been one of the central focuses of our administration since I was sworn in back in January. What we found is that a healthy economy all absolutely is based in a quality education system. So we're reworking our education system from the bottom up and inside out. You know, and if you look back in world history, despots, slave owners, dictators have all tried to keep one thing from happening, and that they kept their people from learning and kept their people from reading. From the British beating and killing priests in Ireland for teaching people how to read, for slave owners killing people and teachers for teaching slaves how to read. They knew, the oppressor knows that the oppressed won't be oppressed anymore if they have an education that they can make a living with and have personal dignity for. This January, for the first time, the city will provide affordable, quality pre-K to its 3- and 4-year-olds. Pre-K has tremendous... Pre-K, as you know, has tremendous benefits. In the long term, pre-K drastically increases the odds that children from low-income, minority, or single-parent families will succeed academically and professionally. As a result, studies show that the return on investment for every $1 in quality pre-K ranges from $4 to $16 in the form of reduced need for social services, special ed, remediation, public safety activities, as well as increased tax revenue. There are also more immediate economic benefits. The availability of affordable quality early childhood education supports parents in the workforce by reducing absenteeism and turnover while also improving productivity for the business owner. Just the other day, our pre-K director met a woman who was forced to call out on her very first day on the job because her son's child care center couldn't open due to staffing shortages. In too many cases, unexpected absences like those in low-wage jobs will result in termination, trapping both parent and child in an impossible position. The parent needs to support their child, but cannot afford the quality pre-K that will allow them to be a reliable employee. Economists also argue that higher earnings among quality pre-K teachers and staff results in more money, obviously circulating throughout the economy. Child care and early learning professionals generally spend most of their earnings locally. In fact, an economic impact study found that for every $1 invested in pre-K in Pennsylvania, a total of $1.79 is generated in total spending within the state. Our next effort was in community schools. Now, we didn't invent community schools. They've been going on in the country for a long time, and I will point to Cincinnati as one of the finest examples of community schools that I've seen around the places that we visited. Community schools also are hand in hand with pre-K. Community schools are public schools where a dedicated coordinator takes largely already existing services provided by the government or other nonprofit service providers and integrates them directly into the school where the students can access them most easily. In many cases, these services are also available to the larger community, making the school a neighborhood hub and increasing parental engagement and community investment in the success of that particular school. Depending on the community where the school is located, these services can include GED classes, job training, opportunities, or ESL classes. The idea behind this program is simple. We have to address the economic factors that impact our children outside of the classroom if we expect children to succeed inside the classroom. And again, making that choice between taking a day off to take your kid to the dentist or taking your day off to take your kid to the eye doctor and perhaps losing your job is a conundrum that you don't want to put any parent in. You can drop off your child in the morning into a quality school after they've finished a quality pre-K and go to work assured that the needs of your child will be taken care of in the school building. You're a much happier parent, a much more calm parent, and you will be a better parent, and that child will have better outcomes. The next area that we've concentrated on is CTE, career to training. The implementation of community schools will be supported by an investment in career and technical education, also known as CTE. CTE programs at the K-12 and post-secondary levels prepare students for high-priority occupations, those with in-demand skills that are likely to have family-sustaining wages, which is also key to raising families. You can't make $8 an hour and raise a family. It's insane. And that's why the $15 minimum wage is required. And $15, frankly, if you think about your own life, $15 isn't enough. But $15 is much more than obviously some of these people working at slave wages. The school district plans to have 12,000 students enrolled in 160 programs by 2020. And we are supporting them in that effort by building training pipelines that will lead students from high school into community college or employment immediately following graduation. The third, and I think very, very important symbolically, is our Rebuild program, which will be paid for by the Philadelphia beverage tax. Finally, to keep our children out of trouble and further learning after school, we are making a $300 million investment in our city's rec centers, libraries, and parks. Marco Rubio moment, I'm sorry. In comparison to other major cities, Philadelphia has historically underinvested in these assets, and there have been serious economic consequences. One in three visitors to our free library system are seeking help with job applications. In some communities, libraries have so transformed into job resource centers that librarians regularly loan out ties for for people to go on job interviews. But because of lack of upkeep, these critical hubs frequently have to close due to flooding or even just excessive heat. By investing in these centers, we hope not only to give these services a boost, but also to drive private investment in the surrounding communities. When the city and the Fairmount Park Conservancy invested $5 million in Hunting Park, which is a large green space in lower northeast Philadelphia, upper north Philadelphia, which was not a safe and decent place to be, and was very much a dangerous place to be. But a $5 million investment in a large acre park, crime went down 89% within a half-mile radius of the park. Not only inside the park, but within a half-mile radius around the park, crime went down 89% for 3 consecutive years, making them more attractive, making these parks more attractive to new business and real estate development. So in conclusion, in Philadelphia, we are working hard in transforming Philadelphia's economy, but it would be a long process. In my next 3 years as mayor, we could perfectly implement all the programs I've described today, and we would still just have begun to steer us in the right direction. And for that reason, programs like these are often ignored in favor of policies that will have more short-term benefits. But to govern by politics and not by policy is a terrible disservice to the people of Philadelphia and to any city. So I thank you all for what you're doing and what you can encourage our elected leaders to always put people first instead of the politics. You have a very important mission. We are depending on you and your brain power and your genius to guide us in the right direction. There's a few things I learned in politics and in being mayor. I am not the smartest person in any room. And when you get to a point where you think you're the smartest person in every room, you're not that smart. So when you're in a room like this and you look at the brain power and the opportunities that will come out of meetings and discussions like this. I was recently at the UN where we were talking about global initiatives like this. There's a lot of smart people who have a lot of good ideas. And if you're a smart mayor, if you're a smart leader, you keep your mind open and you keep your ego in the car. And every good idea is not yours. There's lots of good ideas that other people have that you can implement. And just let me give you one other word about the fight we had with Big Soda. And they are, like Big Tobacco, like Big Pharma. They're big, and they came after us. Hammer and tong, $10 million worth of TV ads. I had more negative things said about me in that soda fight than I did in the election. It's nice to wake up every morning and as you're putting your pants on, you see your face like all crunched up and saying something. I'm like, really? It's just like, really? But you know what I learned? They hired every lobbyist in the world. Friends of mine who were lobbyists called me up and said, I got a call. Would you be mad? I said, no, take their money. I don't care. Make a payday. Good luck. Because I had lobbyists. I had pre-K mommies. You mess with a pre-K mom. I mean, seriously. Just tell a pre-K mom that, no, we can't help you. No, we're not going to listen to you. We have pre-K moms. We have Parks Recreation Department and Parks advocates, strong, committed people. We have the construction trades and other unions who want to do rebuild, and rebuild needs to be done in a diverse way. It's an opportunity for us to generate $300 million in investment, leveraging another $150 to $200 million in outside investment. It's $600 million in investment that could change the workforce in our city when it comes to construction trades, by helping these young men and women get a job that makes $30 an hour. That is transformative. I know people that we've been fighting for down at the airport, and we're getting close to getting that resolved, that women worked for 15 years for a company and made $8 an hour. Cleaning planes, something that's critical, $8 an hour. And when they talked about forming a union, they fired them. And they changed their shifts. And they found out what their kids' needs were, and then they changed their shifts so that they wouldn't match just horrible, horrible stuff. And you could be anti-union, pro-union. I certainly recognize the philosophy, and I can understand your argument. But the ability to bargain, the ability to take what is your talent and what is your equity in a business, which is your labor, and to combine together to negotiate fairly for wages and benefits is the American way. It's what America is about. My goal as mayor, our goal as the administration, and you have to do, and let me just give you one anecdote to keep. As we talked about earlier, this job is really hard, and sometimes it just eats you inside. Because when an officer gets shot sitting in a car 18 times for nothing, for no reason, when a young person gets caught in a crossfire in a neighborhood for nothing, when a young woman sitting in a car with her boyfriend not bothering a soul winds up dead because some guy had a gun with 15-shot clips and 15 bullets in a bag, randomly just shooting people on the street. When those things happen, man, it is just devastating. But if you really want to be normal and sane, go to a quality pre-K or a kindergarten. And I don't care what neighborhood it's in, I don't care what color those kids are. They are beautiful, pristine vessels of just purity. Their brains are uncluttered. They're sucking in all the information. They don't see race. They want to hug you. They want to talk to you. They want love. And if you can know that that's what you're really doing, that's who you're really doing it for, you'll get up every day, regardless of how you feel, and go back to work and do it again. So help us get our children there. Thank you.
So that was wonderful. Thank you, Mayor Kenny. Because of a pre-scheduled event, Mayor Kenny will not be able to join us in the next part of our plenary session. But I want you to know that we really designed this next session to highlight the importance of mayoral leadership in advancing inclusive growth and to learn more from global examples that might inform the work we do in local communities. As the mayor just said, you're not always the smartest person. The people in your neighborhood, your town, your state might not be the smartest person. We often look to other states and communities. We really wanted to look globally and internationally and find models that would be helpful in our approaches here locally. So we wanted to highlight mayors. We wanted to highlight what's going on around the world, and we luckily stumbled upon a fantastic model and a partner who was able to do both of those things for us here today. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, uses information and data to help governments foster prosperity and fight poverty by promoting economic growth and financial stability. Working closely with their 35 member countries and other emerging economies, the OECD brings greater clarity to how these issues are implemented or addressed around the world. Today we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to start off with a keynote address, and then we will move into a discussion with mayors from around the country who are working on these issues. So you are first going to hear a keynote address from Gabriela Ramos, who is Chief of Staff of the OECD, Special Counselor to the Secretary General of the OECD, and I love this part of your title, Sherpa to the G20. In this role, it is. In this role, she has many responsibilities, and she has launched and supervised a number of innovative programs, including new approaches to economic challenges and the gender and skills strategy. And today, she will be sharing with you, with us all, the Inclusive Growth Initiative, which highlights the role of mayors and mayoral leadership. After hearing from Gabriela, her colleague, Lamia Kamal Chawi, will moderate a conversation with Mayor Dana Redd of Camden, New Jersey, Mayor Oliver Gilbert of Miami Gardens, Florida, and Mayor Lovely Ann Warren of Rochester, New York. And so before bringing Gabriela up, I want to keep with the theme of major award winners and say that in 2013, Gabriela was awarded the distinction of Knight in the French National Order of Merit by French President Francois Hollande. And so we are just in the presence of greatness here. So please join me in welcoming Gabriela Ramos to the stage.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Teresa, what an introduction. This is really a pleasure to be here. And a difficulty because I think it's very difficult to follow the very inspiring talk by the Major Kenny. So I will do my best. And I have to say that I've been enjoying the conversation with mayors because you make things happen, and that's why we are here. As Teresa said, we are the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, founded by the US to administer the Marshall Plan, who's looking for better policies for better lives. So it's great to be here with people that are doers and that are really hands-on in every aspect of this agenda that we care about. Of course, we are a global organization and we deal with the global economy. And I have said to our colleagues, Mr. Haskell, and Teresa, that the Federal Reserve of the US and the central banks saved the world economy from the financial crisis. But we are so proud to see that they are also so engaged in their communities, not only sponsoring events like this, but looking at the issues that concern us all. And so we're happy to share with you where we are on this agenda. First of all, why inclusive growth? Yesterday, the OECD, as the IMF and the World Bank and many other institutions have come out with the outlook of the global economy, and is not looking good. After 8 years of the crisis, we continue to slash down the prospects for growth for the global economy. Trade is halfway, international trade. International investment is halfway. Productivity in the most advanced economies is declining. So the outlook is not looking good. And therefore, I think that we should all be concerned about this. The US is doing better. I have to say, the US is always a very dynamic economy. But the US cannot be the only engine of growth for the world. I think that we really need to help the central banks of the world with more structural policies to advance better prospects for the agenda, which is looking kind of desperate, the question of inequality. And we have been documenting this for the past. Inequality of income has increased in the most advanced economies. I am Mexican. I can say, well, many institutions, we still don't have all the systems that are required, tax transfers, all these benefits, pensions. You have them. Economies have seen the inequalities of income and opportunities increase immensely. That's something of concern. And inequality, as the Major said, is not about money only. It starts with money, it starts with income, but inequalities reproduce itself by low access to quality education, low access to quality health, low access to quality infrastructure, low access to quality jobs, and therefore we said at the OECD that there are people, regions, and firms that accumulate disadvantages. So how do we break that link is very, very important. And we have documented, of course, how much inequality of income has increased in the OECD economies, and of course we work also with the emerging economies. A decade ago, the richest 10% earned 6 times what the poor 10% earn. Now is 9 times. In the US is 14 times and increasing. In my country is 25, Brazil is 55. So in all the countries it's not looking good. But if you look at wealth, this is 77 times, which is the part that we do not take into account because we're looking always at flows. We don't look at stocks. And stocks matter because, as Mr. Piketty showed, if wealth increases exponentially, then it's very difficult to try to overcome the outcomes of this very skewed distribution of income and wealth. The question of gender, very important. Women access to labor markets, women access to the same level of pay, to the same work. And this is an aspect that, again, with the quality childcare facilities, as Major mentioned, could be addressed. And the question of how much life expectancy is determined by where you are born, and where is your race, and where is your country. And so I think that this is something that should be of great concern to all of us. So at the OECD, of course, we document all this. We are also an institution that gathers a lot of information, indicators, comparisons, international policies. But we're also there not only to say, oh my God, let's ring the alarm bell, is also to see how can we do to address these issues, and how can we, not only the federal governments, but also the majors, the cities, the localities can also tap these issues. And we, of course, have been partnering. We're happy to partner with the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, but we have been partnering with many other institutions, including with the WEF. Rick Sammons has been a long, long road to try to put this at the highest level in the world agenda. So the message that we have in our inclusive growth agenda is that we need to put growth at the service of people, and we need to make it work for people. We need to put people at the center of our agendas and to see if any policy that we are going to address is going to be talking to people. And let me tell you something else. Many economists have still saying that inequality promotes growth. Because, you know, those that are working harder and those that are invest more and those that are contribute to, well, no, it's not true. We now have come to the conclusion that it hinders growth. And it hinders because the low-income groups cannot invest in the education of their children. And therefore, these huge bottom 40% do not have access to the tools they need to realize their full potential. And again, this is something that the major mentioned, which is very important. Now, fighting inequality is not only a global and national concern, it's also a very local one. We need cities and their leaders at the center of these fights. Cities generate growth and economic opportunity, but they also concentrate inequalities, and I don't need to repeat all the data that is out there when you look at the difference and the intercity inequality, which is very high, even compared in many respects with the national averages. Cities consistently record higher levels of income inequality than their respective national averages. Sometimes you find really that the dispersion of outcomes for cities is 3 times, 4 times the national average. And here in the US, you have, of course, when you compare the outcomes of certain cities, is not looking good. In Mexico, in my country, again, you can have cities that will belong more to another very backward region in the world, while some cities could become a European city. So it's really the dispersion is so huge that we really need to think about how do we bridge that gap. And so we are certain that inequality has a clear spatial footprint and is there where we really need to take a look at what works and what doesn't, to document those interventions that are really producing something that improve the outcome looking forward. We all know that disadvantaged neighborhoods are often home to poorer housing conditions, limited access to services, and lower quality school, and mounting evidence suggests that poverty and inequality are reproduced across generations. This is another aspect of the work we're doing, looking at intergenerational mobility, because one thing is, of course, very important to document the opinion of the public opinion who, for the very first time in Europe, is saying, my children is not going to have the chances I had. And this is huge, because we're talking about Europe. And therefore, it's very important that we also take a look at how do we put in place the infrastructure, the social infrastructure, that allows us to say, yes, my children will have better chances than myself. And so this is important. And this is interesting, because this is in the most advanced countries. If you go to Africa or if you go to Mexico, we still believe that our children will do better. But the conditions are not comparable in terms of the level of wealth that the US has, or the level of wealth that countries in Europe has really reached. So it's very important that you take a look at that issue also. But cities are not only those that concentrate disparities, inequalities, and all these problems that mayors know better. We also know that they are also the place where innovative solutions are emerging. And we are also working with cities to try to document that. And this is really stepping up and articulating and deliver a vision for inclusive growth, has a very clear city profile. And they also have in hand many policy areas that matter for inclusive growth, like education, like skills, like health, like transport, like housing and spatial development. So if we manage to introduce the inclusive lens in every one of these policy areas that cities have at hand, in the way they spend, in the way they take the decisions, I think that we will be getting better outcomes. Because of course we cannot decide everything relating it to inequality, but mostly all of the agenda can be addressed through the inequality lenses and to the objective of inclusive growth. Cities are also critical investors in inclusive growth, with subnational governments carrying out around 40% of total public spending in the OECD countries and 60% of public investments. And of course, in a time of tight budgets, it's very important to take a look at where you put the money and how do you ensure that it's effectively expended. Now, at the OECD, because we are really looking at how to make more effective these public interventions, we launched the Inclusive Growth Initiative, but we also launched a partnership with cities. And I know that you had yesterday Xavier Briggs from the Ford Foundation. He is our partner, a very dear partner to us in the Inclusive Growth Initiative. And we built a global coalition, and actually just having the podium here allows me to invite majors to join this global coalition, because we found that getting them together to exchange views, to try to see what are the policies that work for these issues is a very interesting way forward. We gathered together champion majors for inclusive growth around the world who are leading the fight against inequality. And let me tell you, alongside Major Bill de Blasio in New York, nearly 50 mayors signed onto the New York proposal for inclusive growth in cities that was sponsored by the OECD and the Ford Foundation, collectively committing to ensure that cities work for all of us. Some of the issues that are included in this New York proposal, and that will not be new for you, first, cities can help provide education and training systems that enable people of all ages and backgrounds to develop skill and improve their life chances. We've heard Major Kinney, but we will hear from the panel, Major in Camden and Miami Gardens and Rochester, your experiences in terms of providing with the skills of the people that are in need of improving their prospects. Second, cities can expand economic opportunities by putting in place policies that support labor market integration, whether it is by expanding childcare and preschool to support women in the workplace, or by helping migrants adapt their skills to new labor market context. And we were just yesterday in United Nations with the President Obama summit on migrants, and we know that this is another aspect that is so important, because we have the view, how do they say, against the tide, that migrants are good for the economy. And that if we implement policies for good integration, for identifying what are the skills that they bring to our economies, we can gain a lot from this, from their participation. Third, we can change the way we build our cities. Too often, housing policies are divorced from a broader strategy for urban development, transport, and access to services. We need housing policies that aim to build cities, not just houses. And fourth, we can invest in high-quality, accessible infrastructure. And this is another aspect that is pretty widespread in terms of how do we ensure that those far background communities can be connected, and how do we ensure that women or men, for the sake, can have very short commuting times, and that they can have jobs that are not implying that they need to have a terrible family life, or that they just need to ignore about family. Family-friendly policies, very important. I think that the U.S. has a lot to learn in this domain, in terms of putting many other aspects of the life of individuals at the center, and not only how many hours you work and how much you produce. I think it's another agenda for improving the well-being of people. And we know also that Philadelphia has made very interesting investment in infrastructure, and we will hear also from the majors. How do we help? I have been just sharing with you all this information. We have a very wide, or I think it's the world's only metropolitan database, although I'm sure that Rick is going to say that he has also a very interesting database. But we are ready to share with you all these indicators with 375 metropolitan areas. We have been conducting a lot of reports. For example, we conducted this Chicago three-state metropolitan area in the United States, and we were very timely because we gave it to the President Obama, so he was very interested. But we have worked with many cities in all of our countries, but cities also, Sao Paulo, Mexico, etc. And what is interesting is that the OECD Secretariat, where I belong, we are not telling majors what they need to do, or we're not telling the public officials what they need to do. They know better. But what we're saying is what others are doing that is working, and that might you want to take a look. So I think this cross-pollination among different public actors could be of interest. And then the network of majors. It's very important that we have the agents of change connected and working together. So without further ado, We're very honored to be here. We are looking forward to listening to all of you. I have to say that I have also the honor to introduce the wonderful panel that is going to accompany us. Teresa mentioned Lamia Kamal Shawi. She is a real champion. She has been spearheading the efforts of the inclusive growth agenda of the OECD, but actually she has, you know, you find sometimes that there is a pandemic and everybody, the world looks for the experts on pandemics, no? Or you have the financial crisis and then everybody looks for who's... Lamia has been working with cities for the last 18 years, and she has been pushing this agenda at the OECD to say it's not enough, the federal policies, let's look at cities. So I'm very grateful that I'm very proud that she's going to be chairing or moderating the panel, and that we will have the benefit of listening to the impressive work that Dana Reed, the mayor of Camden, New Jersey, that Oliver Gilbert III, from Miami Gardens, Florida, and of lovely Warren, and we love the name, we said it on the table, Mayor of Rochester, New York, will have to share with us. Thank you again, and I'm very, very happy to be here with you.
Maybe we can start? Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot for welcoming us to this distinguished panel of mayors.
Your mic's not on, I don't think. My mic's on. I get to sit in the middle. Look at this.
What do I have to do?
It's on now, I think.
It's on? Okay.
Right.
Great. So thank you very much to Gabriela for the very nice introduction, and welcome to our distinguished panelists.
Yeah, I still don't think it's...
There's still a problem?
I think it needs to be turned up a little, maybe.
Does it work?
Try your microphone.
Yes, I'm on.
Okay.
You're on?
We're on?
Testing.
Does it work?
All right.
Okay. So in this panel, I'm going to speak at the same moment. In this panel, we will go deeper into the policies that these distinguished city leaders are putting in place to address inequalities and to promote an inclusive growth agenda. This is my
is so
first
interesting.
experience.
Yeah.
This is very interesting.
Yeah. Wow.
So let me start by introducing Mayor Dana Reed from Camden, New Jersey. Since taking office in 2010, she has implemented important reforms in the area of public education and policing. The policing reform was called a symbol of promise for the nation by President Obama when he visited your city last year. That's very impressive. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Next, we have Mayor Oliver Gilbert III from Miami Gardens, which is the third largest city in Miami-Dade County and the largest predominantly black city in Florida. Mayor Gilbert is the second mayor of the city since the city incorporated in 2003. A lifelong resident of Miami Gardens, Mayor Gilbert has a bold vision to transform the city, and we're very much looking forward to hearing from you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Finally, it's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Lovely Warren. I'm going to repeat what Gabriela said. We're impressed by this incredible first name coming from other countries. So you are from Rochester, New York. She's the first female mayor and the youngest mayor in Rochester's recent history. Since taking office, Mayor Warren has also embarked on an ambitious agenda to bring more jobs, better schools, and safer and more vibrant neighborhood to the city. So let me briefly explain the format of the session. We will have 3 rounds of discussion, and I will invite each mayor to share your thoughts and experiences in the 3 following themes. The first one will be about investing in people. The second one, investing in places. And last but not least, the politics and process of promoting inclusive growth in cities. So we have a tight moment. We will have to stick to the time so that you all will have a chance to address the 3 questions. So sometimes I might be a little bit nasty, but please apologize in advance. So let's start with the very first round, which is of question, which is around the theme of investing in people, putting people at the center of the effort. We know very much that education and skills are really the key driver of inclusive growth, if not the most important one. However, we have documented that in many, many countries, including in the United States, the education systems tend to reproduce rather than remediate inequalities, and too often many low-skilled workers are trapped in unemployment or low-skill, low-quality jobs. So I'd like to begin our discussion by asking your view on how you address this issue in your cities. My first question will go to Mayor Warren from Rochester. Improving education outcome, particularly for your city's youngest resident, is one of your top priorities. You've launched the 3 for 3 initiative, which focuses on literacy skills for children aged 3 to 3rd grade. This is extremely interesting. Why did you choose to focus on this age group first? And what tools do you have at your disposal as a mayor to make this happen? Please.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I want to also thank the Federal Reserve for this panel and for bringing us all together to talk about some very important issues that are facing many of the cities across not just the United States, but across the world. For Rochester, we are a city that is #1 for childhood poverty for a city of our size. We are a city of 210,000 residents located in upstate New York, in between the cities of Syracuse and Buffalo. And taking office, I took the time to go and visit our schools. In Rochester, the mayor is not in control of schools. They actually have a elected school board. But what happens in our schools directly impacts what happens in our neighborhoods and in our community. And so looking at, I was at a school, and the students had put together a play, and the kindergartners had got up there and they were singing this poem, I Am Somebody. And each of them were just so excited, and they were so eager to learn, and you just saw it beaming off of them. And I'm sitting in the front row, and I'm looking at each of their faces and in their eyes, and I know that if we do not do something, more than half of these students won't make it. It is a proven fact. And so I went back to my team, and I said, you know, we need to look at how, even though City Hall does not have control of the schools, we can impact it some kind of way. How can we do this? We pulled together a group of experts in our community and said, you know, look at this. Where do we need to start? Where do we need to invest our money? And how do we, as a city, make sure that we are delivering the message that we have to do something about the education of our children? We have programs in our community that dealt with from birth to 2 years old, where they provided support to mothers, young mothers, or any mothers that wanted assistance. But at the age of 2, or when the child turned 3, that those programs stopped. And then you did not see that child again until that child was 5 and ready to go to kindergarten. And so you basically had some investment, and then it was a void. And then now you're seeing these children at 5 years old, and it's too late. And so we wanted to start at 3 years old. We needed to get our young people in high quality pre-K programs at the age of 3, no later than the age of 4. And so we started to talk to not only the state government, but also our local officials and foundations about investing in early pre-K because we had to give our children a fighting chance at life. And the way that you do that is to start at the beginning, to instill in them the importance of education, but also to bring their families along as well. And that's what we've started to do in Rochester. And and right now, in the city of Rochester, we have the governor invested a significant amount of money in pre-K 3 and 4. And so the majority, about 99% of our 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds that want to be enrolled in pre-K are now enrolled in those programs. And we will continue to do that and work with the school district when the child is now 5 and in kindergarten. And because we know that if a child is not reading at grade level by 3rd grade, that the likelihood of them finishing high school is diminished and the likelihood of them going to prison is increased. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. It was very insightful. At the OCD, we have been working on our early childhood program for a long time at the national level. But we have started to identify a couple of cities, not just in the United States, but also in other parts of the world that are taking similar actions. So that's very interesting. I'm now turning to Mayor Gilbert III, Oliver III.
You can just call me Gilbert. Or no, I'm just Mayor Gilbert or Mayor Oliver or Mayor the Third. Either way, it works. It's good. Just roll with it.
I like it.
All right.
With your summer jobs program, you are targeting another critical stage of development, which is focusing on the youth age 14 to 27. Can you tell us why this program is so important for Miami Gardens, and how did you get the local business support to this program?
Well, the first thing we did was partner with Career Source, which is actually a county and state agency, and they draw down workforce dollars from the federal government. They had dollars that they said if they would match us 1-for-1, and they said, well, if you do $50,000, we'll do $50,000. That's $100,000 in jobs. And so I said, well, what if I did $100,000? And they said, well, then we'll do $100,000. And they said, well, what if I do $200,000? And so my goal was to test their limit. The idea is this. When I was a kid, there was always something to do during the summer. We either went to summer school or we went to summer camp or we had a summer job because our parents still had to work, but there was always something for us to do. Well, you look now, they've cut out most of summer school in a lot of the cities, definitely in Dade County. Most kids won't be going to summer school. Most kids won't necessarily have summer jobs. I wanted a chance to expose them to different businesses, including the city, as we were one of the largest employers, including my office, as I had 5 students, running my office for an entire summer, which was an experience. And I joke with our employees, in some instances, an improvement. But they might be competition. But it was interesting because I wanted them to see someone like me. Look, I went to Parkview Elementary. It's in Miami Gardens, my hometown. Parkway Middle, that's in Miami Gardens, my hometown. Miami Norland Senior High School, in Miami Gardens, my hometown. When I went to law school at UM, I caught the bus from my hometown to the Metro Rail and caught the Metro Rail and the bus all the way back at night. I wanted them to see that same kid. That same kid is now running this city. That same kid is now giving them this job. That same kid is showing them that when you hear that thing that, they can only be what they see, well, see me. I overcame every obstacle that you're being presented. Nothing on the streets are new. They've always been distractions. They're always going to be distractions. Those things exist. You have to actually want something more. I want to show you that it's doable. And so the summer job program, from just taking the money and getting it to them and having the people help us administer this program, that was one thing. But the idea that these kids still want to come to the office and volunteer in the afternoon. The idea that now when they see me, hey, Mom, that's the mayor. I write his letters. And they do write the letters. And they do a good job. Walk out there and say, hey, you know what? I'm an intern for the mayor. I am the intern for the parks director. I am working at Winn-Dixie. I'm the assistant to the manager. To talk to the local businesses, my speech to them was, would you rather have them hear me paying them or them running up and down your aisles or them getting in trouble on the parks or them getting in trouble on the streets or them being unsupervised for 12 hours a day? We can't do it for everyone, but we can do it for some of them. And we did it 1 year, and 1 year, the council said, okay, we're going to try this, Mayor, and we tried it. And then the next year, we doubled the money. And in our coming fiscal year, we're looking on doubling it again. Because my idea is that when we talk about investing in America's infrastructure to build a stronger America, the most important infrastructure we can actually invest in is people. The roads are important, the broadband is important, but having people who have the ability to innovate in these areas, to drive on these roads, to move commerce, investing in them. And sometimes in politics, we get caught up in talking and helping the people who can vote. And that's great. We have to do that. People who vote, I love voters. Make sure that you tell them that. I love voters. But also from a perspective of we have to build something. We have to, when they talked about having a place that you think you're going to do better than your parents, that's not the kids' failure, that's ours. That is ours as a national community. That is our failure. If they don't feel like they can do better, we have not done our job. We have not created an environment as a national community that allows someone who's born into it and benefits from the things that happens in it to believe that they can expand what we know to be an expandable American dream. So that's our failure. I don't want it to be mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Youth unemployment is really a key issue. It's one of the tragedies that we have observed in recent times in most of the OECD countries. It's the double rate of the average in countries. So what you're doing is very important, and what you're doing is going to help us to disseminate this very good experience. I hope we will be able to monitor this type of experience over time. I'm now turning to Mayor Camden, Mayor of Camden. Camden is seeing a flurry of development projects in your city. You have been quite successful in attracting business to the city in recent years. Of course, there are positive development for the city as a whole, but what strategy have you adopted to ensure that these changes benefit local residents and in particular the disadvantaged communities? Are they prepared for the new job? We are talking about the future of work, the new type of job that are being developed. Are they prepared for that?
So thank you for your question, and thank you to the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia for convening this conversation, which is very important to the work that we're doing to reinvest in our communities, but also to make sure that the residents benefit from any economic development strategies that are being implemented. In Camden, there is a lot that is going on, from public safety to the creation of a new police department to involving the community in many of these decisions that are being made by government, but making sure that the community and residents are our partners at the table, to workforce development and education and job creation. Over the last 2 years, about $2.5 billion have been invested in the city of Camden with companies that are committing to the city to call Camden home and other companies that are expanding. With that comes the creation of jobs, both temporary in the construction industry and then permanent jobs once these businesses finally open their door. I have to say that the platform for much of this work that's happening is undergirded with public safety. Secondly, the eds and meds, which really has identified Camden in a new way. We were once an industrial city, and like most industrial cities across the nation, there was a period in our history where there was disinvestment and a migration out. So now we're starting to see the migration back to cities like Philadelphia, Camden, and Rochester, and certainly Miami Gardens. And so now we are working with a number of partners in the city of Camden to make sure that our residents are prepared for the jobs that are here, the jobs that are coming. And so most recently we launched a Camden Construction Career Initiative, which is simply a pre-apprenticeship program to train our residents so that they can work on many of the construction projects that are currently in construction in the city, but not just a job in the city, the importance of creating a career in the building trades where they can work on other projects statewide and certainly in the region. Before I came here this morning, we were at a community outreach, and I can tell you that there is high interest in our residents wanting to work and go back to work. Another point I just want to make, when I started as mayor in 2010, the unemployment rate in the city of Camden was 19%. We've now trended downward to roughly 11%, and that's because of the eds and meds being our largest employers in the city of Camden. Rutgers University, Cooper University Hospital, our chancellor is here, and she works in partnership with me in the city of Camden, our chancellor Phoebe Hatton from Rutgers University. But again, we expect to see unemployment trend down even further as these new businesses open their doors. My job as the mayor, and as you've heard from Mayor Warren, certainly from Mayor Gilbert, is to get folks ready. And then lastly, because I know we're on a 3-minute time frame, we've been in debate, so we know how we have to move along, but pre-K to 12th grade education is very, very key. And Mayor Kenny spoke to a career and technical education, because not every child is going immediately into college. Some, like myself, will graduate high school, go to work, and go to college in the evening, which was my story. And so I think we need to create not only the pipelines that go from cradle to college to career, but also pipelines that take our young people from cradle to career, college as an option, but certainly immediately into the workforce. And that's what we're doing in the city of Camden.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So we talk about education and skills being the key drivers of inclusive growth, and we have heard a lot of different experiences. We all agree that these are very important pillars, but we should not overlook the importance of the environment in which people live and work. This is something that, by the way, it's typical a city responsibility, and it tends to be overlooked by the upper level of government. Why? It has a great impact. We know very much that we need to have the right built environment to help alleviate instead of reproducing concentrated poverty and inequality. So the first question goes again to you, Mayor Reid, because one of the most visible projects you had in Camden is related to blighted properties. I heard that there are over 600 properties being demolished to make room for everything from new housing to pocket parks. Tell us what was the situation prior to the launch of the project, and how do you plan to leverage these spaces to benefit again to all residents of your city?
So for those of you that are familiar with Camden, Camden has had many issues, and so as the mayor, we do not have the luxury to concentrate on one. We need to find strategies and partnerships and collaborations to concentrate on a number of things and all of it at the same time. And one of the issues, as I reflected back, has been abandoned structures in the city of Camden. Our residents have advocated for many of those structures to either be rehabilitated and or for those structures that are deemed unsafe, vacant, and abandoned properties to be demolished. That issue resonated back in 1999, to my recollection, and there was a small movement in collaboration with county government to try to safeguard these properties and seal them up. But then again, the issue surfaced once again in 2009. Unfortunately, coming into office in 2010, Camden did not have the resources to tackle abandoned properties in large scale and large mass. One, because there was a downturn in the economy, and then two, we were faced with our own budget deficit. But thankfully, after making many difficult decisions during the first term, the first 4 years, we were able to get our finances in line and under control, and to turn Camden's municipal budget around to a point in time where we got our first investment bond credit rating in over 16 years. What this allowed us to do was to go out for bonding, $8 million, so that we could demolish throughout the city of Camden close to 600 properties. So in other words, of the 19 census tracts in Camden, every census tract has seen vacant properties that were falling down come down. And then in turn, taking those lots and greening those lots. In some neighborhoods, as we're thinking through with the residents about planning and revitalization and what that vision looks like, we are reducing density in neighborhoods such as Whitman Park. But in other areas, residents want to see the pop-up parks. We're also advancing with our Coopers Ferry partnership, the Connect the Lots program, which has had yoga happen through many of our open spaces. And so I think as we look at neighborhoods that have been distressed for many years, we have to think in a holistic manner. So it's not just taking the properties down and leaving them, it's taking the next step to revitalize and keep that energy and synergy going so that residents are at the table, but they're seeing and beginning to believe again that there is hope, that change can happen when we all pull together.
Thank you very much, Mayor. We know that redevelopment projects have huge impact in some cities, and particularly small cities. Miami Gardens. Your voter just approved an amendment to the city charter that will give the city more control over future development, in particular in this area that you mentioned when we were at the lunch, surrounding the Miami Dolphins Stadium. Can you tell us about the story?
Well, first, whenever she says Miami Dolphins, you all just need to clap. I mean, I know this is Philly territory, and I know y'all won 2 games, so everybody, y'all good now. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, no, Philly, woohoo. But I remember when. Yeah, but so, listen, Miami Gardens, we're home of the Miami Dolphins. And so when the Super Bowl comes to South Florida, it's actually not coming to South Florida. It's not coming to Miami. It's not coming to Miami Beach, even though that's the picture they show. We don't actually have a beach. We have a little Snake Creek, but we don't have a beach. It's coming to Miami Gardens. And it was an unincorporated area, before 2003. We incorporated it as a city, the 3rd largest city, 110,000 people. One of the things that happened when the city incorporated was they exempted from any city control the area that was around the stadium. So there had been some bickering back and forth between community activists, and back then Joe Robbie, you all probably won't remember that, he was the original owner of the Dolphins. And so he didn't feel like the people in the area should have any say over the stadium, the zoning around the stadium, building in the stadium, any of that stuff. And so when I became mayor in 2012, one of the things I said was that it's just not acceptable. And so when I say things aren't acceptable, I mean in its actual literal sense, I will not accept it. And I'm a litigator by trade. So I asked nicely, and they said no, and then I filed a lawsuit. So and so we started the conversation about how joint jurisdiction would look, and they didn't come along right away. But after a few public meetings, and they saw the prosecutor side. I mean, right now you all are seeing the guy with the nice socks and the bow tie, but not the guy who actually put people in prison. Not the prosecutor, the person who's going to make a case from A to Z all the way down. This is why you're wrong. And so when they saw that, we were able to build a consensus on having joint jurisdiction with the county and with the city, because fundamentally people of an area deserve a say over what's built, how it's built, and how it works of everything in that area. And I reject the idea that the wonderful residents of Miami Gardens shouldn't have a say in that just because somebody had an argument with the football team owner 25 years ago. So we took care of that. It became important because Miami Gardens we were a lot of loose neighborhoods. And so there are a lot of people, but there aren't a lot of businesses. If you want to eat at a national chain restaurant, there's one Chili's. There's 110,000 people, but one national chain restaurant. So when we sat down and I looked at the land use around the stadium, I realized that the county had the land use and it was all zoned residential. And just north of that, Calder Racetrack and Casino was zoned agricultural. And so when you talk to people about how and why businesses don't move here, they always jump to, as Americans, we have this thing where we will jump to race as the very first thing very often. Well, they don't want to do it because it's a black city. Well, they don't want to do it because they can only build houses. And that's hurting our tax base also. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the zoning. We're going to change the future land use. We're going to change all that. And then we're going to add an entertainment overlay district. And then we're going to go out and we're going to aggressively recruit people. And so this year, we have $100 million in new development in the city. And when I was talking about it in the State of the City address, what I talked to them about is we need to prepare ourselves for the influx of businesses, because Business goes where opportunity is. And that opportunity at its very basic sense is how you can use land. So I start with very basic premises. On a major commercial corridor, there ought to be the opportunity to do commerce. So if you're going to have a lot of cars, you want places that people can stop and spend money. I start with the idea that you ought to be able to have a date in your city. A woman ought to be able to buy a new dress. A guy ought to be able to take her out to drinks at a lounge, go to a nice restaurant. If they want to, afterwards go dancing. And I'm not going to say the last thing because I see you getting nervous there. But yeah, you need to be able to do that. And so there's an added cost to living in a city where you can't do any of that because you have to get in your car and drive to go to a restaurant. That's gas and time. You got to drive to go to a movie. That's gas and time. We can't have a small play or a small concert. You have to go places to do things. If you have to go places to do things, then you're always going someplace. You're never building where you are, and that means you live in a city and not a community. A community isn't just a city incorporated under state law. A community is a place you can spend your time and your money. And so I'm in the business of building and designing a community. We have a city. We're building the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me now turn to Mayor Warren. With around 1/3 of Rochester residents living below the federal poverty guidelines. This is very hard. You've made poverty reduction a priority of your agenda. And through the Pathway to Prosperity, I understand this is a federal program, you are focusing your effort on one specific distressed areas. Can you concretely tell us, how you are working to bring people out of poverty in general, and in particular, how this experience can be scaled up at the city level, at the state level, and for the nation as a whole? Why not?
Well, Rochester was home to 3 large companies, Kodak, Xerox, and Bausch & Lomb. And when those companies significantly downsized their workforce, they're still there, but they don't employ as many employees as they used to in the past. We had to figure out what to do. Fortunately for us, it wasn't like they closed the doors and everyone got laid off at the same time. It was something that really creeped in, and then we turned around and realized that we have a situation where there was a significant number of people in our city that's in poverty. Tomorrow you will hear from Dr. Leonard Brock, who's here from Rochester, who's going to talk about the Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative, where we're really focusing on giving our citizens and our residents the resources that they need to work in the new economy. We are now not home to 3 large companies. The people that are our number one employers is the hospital. It's the University of Rochester and Strong and Rochester Regional Health. And then, of course, there's Wegmans, our grocery store. And so we recognize that our economy changed right before our eyes, and we never trained our citizens to actually be a part of that new economy. And so we wanted to focus on a particular area of our city called the Beechwood, Emma, and Market View Heights neighborhood. And we did that because we wanted an area that had the biggest fire but was close to the most water. And so we had other areas of our city that was more challenged, but the resources in this area, the businesses, the city services, the universities, the colleges, all of them were in this particular area doing some sort of work, but it was not in coordination. We realized that our city was program rich and results poor. If you had a problem in Rochester, we had a program that was meant to fix it. But for some reason, we were not doing that, and it was not really reaching the residents that needed that. And so everybody took a step back. Actually, IBM came in, and they basically said, you're going around and you're building programs, but you're not building people, because your programs are really focused on the survival of the program and not the survival of the person. And so you want individuals in your city to fit in this box, and they need a circle, they need a triangle, and you're so rigid with those requirements, people can't fit within them. And so we decided to take a step back. We decided to come together as a community, look at where we needed to make investment in, and most of it is in training. We know that the industry of tomorrow is healthcare and food production. Well, why are we not training our folks to do that? And in advanced manufacturing. A lot of those individuals that were unemployed in Rochester because of the decline of those 3 major companies actually started companies. And so 1,400 now in our region, businesses employ the 60,000 people that Kodak once employed. And we know that, but they're scattered around. The other issue that we found out is that with transportation, that the jobs that were available to our citizens was not in the area in which they lived. And so you had to figure out a way, how do we either get businesses to come in or develop a strategy in which we can get our employees trained, so that our citizens trained, so that now and get them the resources to get to work and to get home and provide those wraparound services. Dr. Brock is going to talk a little bit more about how we're doing that in Rochester. But again, I think that what you heard from the other mayors earlier, that it is time to stop investing in, not just invest in businesses and the infrastructure. It is the time for government to now invest in people. And that's what cities are doing across the country.
That's true. Thank you. That's very true. We're going to turn to the last round of questions. It's about the politics behind the process of promoting inclusive growth. This is very important. When we launched the Inclusive Growth in Cities initiative, which is part of a broader initiative that we were talking basically with national government, we were thinking about implementation, and we needed the cities to be engaged. But it's not just about implementation, it's about leadership. And we know that the mayors have very strong leadership. So this is maybe the topic of this last round of questions. And the first one will go to the mayor of Miami Gardens.
Clap. There you go.
I did my job. Mayor, as Gabriela mentioned in her remarks, the Greater Miami is one of the most unequal metros in the U.S., but it's also one of the most unequal metro among OECD metropolitan region, which means that if we compare internationally, it's even more striking. How are you working with neighborhood jurisdiction to address this regional challenge, because you are part of the metro? And are there any particular challenges you face as a relatively new city, which was incorporated in 2003?
Well, yeah. Well, the first thing we do is we talk about we're the northernmost city in Miami-Dade County. So we border on the northern side Miramar, which is actually in Broward County, and so we developed a good relationship with them. But in Miami Gardens, it really all starts with, getting the people in Miami Gardens to think of themselves as Miami Gardens. And so I had this tagline: "We are Miami Gardens." We are one Miami Gardens. Because when you have these independent neighborhoods, very proud neighborhoods, Bunch Park, Carroll City, Rolling Oaks, Crestview, Andover, Scott Lake, the Bajas. You have all these neighborhoods that have all these really, really historic, discrete personalities. They take pride in saying who they are. Sometimes it takes a minute for people to get that we're Miami Gardens. We rise or we fall together, and that's it. And so I spend time with that, and now I'm trying to get that together, because it's important to let people who are running countywide and people who are running statewide, and in some instances people who are running nationally, understand that this isn't just 110,000 people, it's 63,000 voters. And so I make the difference, because sometimes while I am trying to deliver services for my residents, they might be making the political calculus of, well, we can't do this here because we have to do this here. I want them to understand the importance of not delivering for people who are going to show up and vote. And so I talk on a fairly regular basis about the most important constitutional right being the one to vote. You need to vote. Don't complain to me if you do not vote. If you're willing to vote, I'm not even telling you who to vote for. But if you're willing to vote, if they're willing to look down there and see, instead of 12 and 13% voter turnout, 60 and 70% voter turnout, I can promise you that when we go to the county and ask for our CRA, they'll give it to us. I can promise you that when we go to DOT to work out stuff in the state, they will give it to us. I can promise you these things happen because these people are sitting in desk, and the difference between people, look, Florida has millions of people. We don't necessarily, not all of them will always vote. And they are making that consideration. You have to actualize your political power. When you actualize your political power, I go from being a mayor that speaks for 110,000 people to a mayor that speaks for the largest black voting bloc in the state. And it's a difference. And so we talk very, very, very intently and very directly about that because ultimately the attention you get with resources is reflective of their respect for your ability to affect them. So I don't want to have to affect you, but I want you to know that I can. Because for far too long, look, why the city incorporated was they felt like they weren't getting the resources that other people were, and they were putting in more money. The next logical step in getting those resources is flexing your muscle. You're big, and size matters. So we're going to make it matter in Miami Gardens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So my last question will go to Mayor Red of Camden. We at the OCD, we make a clear link between inclusive policy making processes and inclusive policy outcomes. Mayor Red, how are you bringing your citizens and other key local stakeholders into the conversation to help steer the direction that you want to promote?
Thank you. So I was on a radio station this past Monday or Tuesday, and I remember the journalist asked me, what do you think is your greatest accomplishment, Mayor Red? And so, you know, while there are many things that have been accomplished in the city of Camden, I don't look at it from the perspective of I look at it from the perspective of we. And I would say that, you know, what I am most proud of is our group that is called the Congress of Residents, Faith-Based, and Community-Based Organizations. And what this organization has done is help us to move forward important policy matters that needed to be addressed for the city of Camden. And just to give you the genesis of how the group was started, as we were facing our fiscal crisis back in 2011 and thinking about and exploring the idea of standing up a new police department under the county auspices. As a mayor, I felt it was important to inform the community why that decision was being entertained, but more importantly, making them a part of standing up a new department. And in many respects, the members served on focus groups, so we don't just talk at them. We listen to our community representatives, and we also put them to work. So we get them engaged in the work of public safety, of creating educational choice in the city of Camden when we needed to make that decision, when Camden was performing in the lowest 5% of all school districts in the city of Camden, or in the state of New Jersey. We had 23 out of 26 failing public schools. And so when our schools were not doing well, we knew our children were not doing well, and that we needed to make a decision that may not have been politically popular, but it was the Congress that stood with me. And if you think of the House of Representatives, that's exactly what this is, just on a local scale. And so, like I said, there are 19 different neighborhoods, and so each neighborhood, they send the stakeholder representatives that they choose to the meetings, which we hold once a month, the last Monday of the month. And so this gives me an opportunity to report out on the next steps and stages and what's coming to Camden, and to get them engaged in the work, such as workforce development and what we're doing now. And they go out and they make sure that that information filters down to their neighborhood, but also that they help us in attracting and recruiting, and they become the messengers of hope for Camden and the belief in what's happening right now. And beyond my term as mayor, and I'll leave you with this because I think my 3 minutes are coming up. When I'm no longer in the seat, I think the greatest way to sustain the work is to make sure residents are leading the change, and that we're having honest conversations with residents about the issues that affect us, why, that we're sharing research and evidence-based strategies with them. So we're giving them tools for transformation, because we also do a training with our resident Congress to make sure that we're giving them the tools so that they can lead change in their communities. And so we've seen this group evolve and really become robust, and they sponsor their own events in their own neighborhoods. And we as a city and our police department get behind them and partner with them all the way. So I'm so proud of my Congress of Residents, faith-based and community-based organizations. Thank you.
Mayor Warren, we have been talking about leadership. We are very proud of the UCD, and we have been saying that many times, that we brought together 50 mayors from around the world who joined our initiative, this global initiative to fight inequalities and promote inclusive growth. But you, the mayor for Rochester, you brought together 100 cities in the United States to reduce gun violence. This is really impressive. So we'd love to hear from you how you reach out to other mayors. What did you do to convince them to join your coalition?
Well, as we know that in our country, many cities, especially urban cities, are facing gun violence on the streets. Last year, unfortunately in Rochester, a group of young people went to a basketball game at the Boys and Girls Club. They walked outside and someone with a AK-47 drove by and shot up the Boys and Girls Club. We lost 3 people that night and 7 people were injured. And as the mayor of the city, of course, you're touched by this, but as Mayor Kinney indicated earlier, you want to know, what can you do? And because I knew that many cities across our country were facing the same thing, we wanted to come together and talk about, what are you doing? How are we going to reduce gun violence on our streets? This is not just impacting what's happening to our neighborhoods, but it impacts what happens to our children in school. It impacts the businesses that want to come to your city. So it has an effect that impacts every part of your community. And so we decided to reach out to different mayors across the country and ask them what they're doing and put together a strategy book on what other cities are doing around this particular issue. And to say in 2017, in June of 2017, that we all will commit to reducing and coming together and declaring June a reduction in gun violence awareness month. And I'm appreciative to those mayors, because a lot of things that came out of that report was issues that we're talking about today. You have to invest in education. You have to invest in workforce development. You have to invest in neighborhoods. And you cannot expect your schools to outperform your neighborhoods. You cannot expect children to be in a neighborhood where they're hearing gunshots every night and then go to class and perform well the next day. And so it has to be something that we look at in a holistic way on how gun violence is impacting every part of our community. And we have to come together to do something about it. And so that's what we're pushing for when we talk about 100 Cities Against Gun Violence, and bringing all of us together, because we're facing the same thing. When you look at what's happening nationally, even around policing issues and other things, it is something that is really going to change the dynamics of this country forever. And that's the way that gun violence is impacting our cities, especially our urban cities, when we look at it. And I am, when I think about what we need to do as a city in Rochester, and you look at I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I used to practice law as well. And I go into the court system, and you see the number of people of color that are basically going through not just family court, city court, county court. You recognize that something has to change. And people in government positions are asked to do a lot more with not, an increase in resources. Government was not built to do the job that we're doing today. And that's why, initiatives like what Mayor Red is talking about, explaining to your citizens that we were not built for this.
However, we're going to rise to the challenge, because if we don't do it, nobody else is equipped to do it. And if we don't make gun violence and changing gun violence on our streets a #1 priority, then it will not happen any other way.
Thank you. So yes, we are coming to an end of this wonderful panel. Mayor Redd, Mayor Warren, and Mayor Gilbert, thank you very much. We need you. We need you to join this coalition because you have very good idea. We want to take your idea and disseminate to other cities. We want you to hear from other cities, but also we want you because BOCD is not just about exchanging ideas among mayors, which is already something very important. It's about you influencing other important agenda, which are more national and global. It's important to have you at the table and to elevate your voice in this very important global challenge like climate change, like water management, things that are not at the city level, but you have the greatest impact at the city level. There are very important decisions that are made at another level in terms of trade, international taxes and things like that. You need to input to that because you can only feel the impact at the local level, but you are not all the time engaged in this global conversation. So we really need you, and we hope to have you with us. Thank you very much.
Great job, thank you. So please join me in thanking the mayors once again. I thought that was a fantastic conversation. Before we have a short break before our next concurrent session, we have one other piece of today's plenary event, what we're calling our international update. The World Economic Forum is known as the International Organization for Public-Private Cooperation, and they use data and networks and collaboration to engage political, business, and other leaders to shape global, regional, and industrial agendas. One of the things that I knew about the World Economic Forum, aside from their very effective research and policy pieces, is that this is an institution that does not, by definition, they do not hold conferences, they hold meetings, because it is the way that they feel that they can engage more effectively with their members and the public at large. And so we are very grateful to have one of their senior staff people here to share with us an initiative that they've been working on that closely aligns with the work that we've been talking about here, the economic growth and social inclusion work. And so Rick Sammons, who is a member of the managing board of the World Economic Forum, is also head of the Forum's Center for the Global Agenda. He leads action and policy-oriented multi-stakeholder initiatives on major global challenges, including such things as sustainability. He's also responsible for the Forum's relations with international organizations and coordinates its portfolio of public-private partnership projects. So we're going to invite Rick up. He's going to share a brief presentation, and if time allows, we will accept a couple of questions at the end of the presentation. So Rick, if you join us on the stage, thank you.
Good afternoon. I suppose I'm your dessert, and I'll try to be have as much zing as possible. Even though I have to confess I don't drink coffee myself, but I encourage you to imbibe if you're so inclined. This is a long lunch session. Let me start by congratulating you, Teresa, and your colleagues here at the Federal Reserve Bank. I mean, I got a quick history lesson from President Mester about this conference. And I think this topic and this conversation represents, it's fair to say, an evolution of a conference about community-related issues and community development and economics. And it's quite timely. Let me also say that let me congratulate the mayors. It's refreshing in any context, but certainly for somebody who spends a lot of time in international discussions, to hear about people who are so connected into trying to find workable solutions, and even as important, finding a way to communicate that in a fashion that generates wider common ground and support from the community. And that's a unique skill, not only to figure out in a laser sharp way what you can most effectively prioritize your resources behind, but also to be able to articulate it in a fashion that generates wider understanding and support. So I'm very impressed by the dynamism, innovation that's going on here. What I'm going to do today is give you a little bit of an outside-in view. We've been, for the last hour or so, kind of talking about things on the ground. I'm going to give you a bit of an outside-in view about how the U.S. seems to be faring relative to our peers. Now, as a setup for that, let me just say that the forum, as Teresa's indicated, the forum is a bit of an unusual animal. It is not a think tank, but it does a lot of research. It's not as you said, it's not a conference organizer, but it probably organizes the world's best-known international summit, which is our annual meeting in Davos. Moreover, we're not an NGO, but we have a portfolio of about 50 different specific projects on different issues. And what we are, however, is a multi-stakeholder, leader-led community. So we have ministers from all sorts of countries, CEOs from about 1,000 of the world's largest firms, heads of academic institutions, heads of international organizations like Gabriella's boss, who also, by the way, sits on our board. And what we do is engage them in specific collaborative acts. One act is simply dialogue, but the other is in very concrete areas. This topic, inclusive growth and development, has been, I would have to say, the most hotly debated, most sought after international challenge in this community. And here I'm referring not simply to the public officials who understandably have to face the voters who are expressing concern about this area. I can tell you that it surprised me. I went away from the organization and came back a few years ago, and to my surprise I discovered that this was the #1 issue troubling CEOs of large firms around the world. They were wanting to talk about labor markets. They were talking about social protection. What can be done basically to help living standards improve better. This is not the conversation that you would have heard in a group of CEOs 10 years ago, 20 years ago, arguably even 5 years ago. There's a sense, as was referred to earlier, that there's a fundamental intellectual challenge to the way we've organized our economies over the last generation, the way we set up market economies. And so what we decided to do is to take a practical look at what can be done, which is essentially the theme of what we just heard in the last session. It's what a mayor has to deal with. What can be done? Now, many of you who run organizations or advise them know that one of the most common approaches when faced with a complex challenge and where you want to develop a strategy that assures your organization of being in the forefront is you benchmark, is you try to figure out what works or what seems to be working elsewhere, and then you benchmark yourself against that, and you do that systematically, and you measure progress over time. Well, as an organization that has the private sector at the heart of it, we were inclined to take such a practical approach. And so what we decided to do is see if beyond the political debate, beyond the philosophical discourse, if you will, could one try to discern from history, historical experience on the one hand, and scholarship, what academics have studied and correlated through empirical research over time, works the best for trying to achieve a win-win between robust growth on the one hand and a high degree of social inclusion in the process, that's to say employment, and the benefits, that's to say income and household wellness, of growth. And so we found from doing a survey of the literature, both on the empirical side as well as the academic and conceptual side of things, that in fact you can identify a set of measures, a set of policy instruments and other types of activities that has a win-win, that has demonstrated a win-win over time. And unfortunately, however, the debate doesn't quite capture that. The debate about inclusion and the frustration with globalization and the worries about technological disruption tend to go very rapidly to maybe two topics, both valid, but way too limited. One is education and skilling on the one hand, and the other one is redistribution on the other. In fact, if you look at history and scholarship, there's a much wider spectrum of things that matter. Now, let me see if I can succeed in pulling up a slide or two for you. Please continue on to the next few slides. Why don't we pause here for this? Here's a quick bit of data for you. Economists tend to measure inequality in societies at two basic levels. One is at the level of where inequality lies before we do redistribution, before we apply tax code progressivity, or before we implement social insurance programs like Social Security or what used to be called food stamps in this country and whatnot, and then after. And what you find is that experience diverges around the world. What you see on the chart here is the U.S. experience, and you can see, without being able to read the numbers too carefully, that basically the moral of this particular chart is that inequality in the U.S. has risen for the last 30 or 40 years, and it's risen primarily because of what we call market inequality. That is to say, the outcomes in the market before government applies redistribution through the tax code or through social insurance programs. And the reason I put this up, if we go to the next slide, is that we found, and please go one further, here, as we looked at the experience and scholarship, there are about 15 different areas that affect this win-win outcome between growth on the one hand and social inclusion on the other. And this has to do with policy or rules on the one hand, or institutional capacity on the other, of agencies to be able to actually execute the policy and norms that we're talking about. And that while we as an economics profession and as economic policymakers over time have been very focused on efficiency, on getting your macroeconomic policy right, fiscal discipline, sound monetary policy, which of course is near and dear to the Federal Reserve System's heart, and competitive markets, because you need market signals in order to get dynamism and growth, and you need a growing pie to be able to do anything in this field. What we have not emphasized as much are these 15 or so areas of policy and institutional strength that have a bearing on the pattern of that growth. That is to say, the extent to which that growth is resilient and sustainable, the extent to which its benefits are diffused broadly through the population. And if you look at the experience of other countries, you find that in many cases they are doing better in a number of these areas than the U.S. is. I know I'm an American myself. In fact, I come from Philadelphia, and I'm so proud to hear our mayor speak so inspirationally here. And I know that we tend to think of ourselves as being in the forefront of the world on many, many things, if not everything, including having the world's most dynamic economy. That is absolutely true. But the reality is, over the last 20, 30, 40 years, other countries have caught up to us in living standards and are doing things in different ways. And you know what? We could learn a thing or two, a trick or two from other countries. And we need to wake up a little bit in that regard. And what I've done for you here is, you'll see in your material, we have distributed to you a kind of a scorecard. If you look at it, it's the document that has a lot of numbers, and it has kind of a multicolored leaf of a tree in it. And we have assembled a cross-country statistical database that looks at markers or indicators in each one of these 15 areas, which we roll up into 7 principal pillars. And they give you a sense for how well the U.S. benchmarks against other countries in our class of countries, in the most advanced countries of the world. We're not comparing the U.S. here to Tanzania or a very poor country in Asia, if you will. This is against our peers, and in fact, the countries at the lower end of that group are like Greece, which are much poorer and have many more problems than we do. If you look at that material, you will see, very interestingly, that we're strong in some respects, but not so strong, and in fact outright lagging in others. And I think this begins to connect to areas where mayors have administrative responsibility that you're wrestling with. You're making up, you're doing workarounds for the failure, in many respects, of our national economic policy and institutions, and the capacity we put behind that support to deliver and to do things in a better way that have been proven to be able to be done in a better way. Now, I look at this data like it's an MRI of the institutional strength of the United States in respect of driving inclusive growth. And if you look, if we move on to the next slide, you will see across the bottom in a traffic light fashion the basic area, the basic sense where the United States does relatively well. Those are in green, and where it does relatively poor, and those are in red or orange. And interestingly, there's more orange, yellow, and red up there than there is green. And this begins to disaggregate this problem, which often gets kind of rolled up into a big, hot, ideologically charged political discussion. But actually, when you break it down, as a business might break down a strategy development process and figure out where you're strong and weak and then try to benchmark progress against it, you begin to see where we have some room to move. Now, to put a little bit finer point on it in a couple areas, let me move to the next slide. And even just in the interest of time, let me move forward and give you some specific numbers. Let's take a look quickly at education. Most of the indicators on education tend to look at how well are we getting our kids into school. Or in some cases, we have some great data from, for example, the OECD that looks at the attainment levels of kids in secondary school. But equally important, if not more important, if one is interested in driving an inclusive model of growth, is the equity of that quality, the equity of access and quality. And if you look here at the United States, you can see that we are quite weak when it comes to trying to provide an equitable level of quality and access to our populations. And this goes fundamentally to some of the issues that our mayors have been talking about here. Now, why is that? It's not a mystical matter why that's the case. It probably goes to structural factors, how we finance our educational systems and the like. If this country is serious about trying to fix this particular very important aspect of inclusive growth, it's got to start looking at the roots of why we get way weaker outcomes from kids who come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Let me continue. Let's take a look at a couple of the other areas to give you a specific sense. On the employment side, you can see that the strictness of our employment protection is the weakest of all advanced countries. We have very long hours of work relative to other countries. We have relatively weak protection of worker safety and health. We're particularly weak on the compensation side of things. We are last among advanced countries when it comes to low pay. That is to say, the proportion of the workforce that earns less than 2/3 of the median wage. We have a very wide wage dispersion, low trade union density, and here's one of particular note. As the workforce has changed over the last generation, a lot more women in the workforce, it no longer is the two-worker household desirable. It's now an imperative for most families. Our support structure for child care and parental leave has not caught up. I'm not just saying this as an abstract political statement. I'm saying it as a matter of empirical evidence compared to the rest of the world in our income category, where you can see that we are the lowest on parental leave support and quite low in the ranks of child care. Similarly, if we look at one or two other areas quickly, we're quite strong on entrepreneurship, which you'll see in the top category. But if you look at the bottom one, on the concentration of rents, economists talk about rents, which is not like a rent on a lease of a house. It's on who reaps the benefits because by virtue of the fact that they own the assets, if you will, if I can state it in that kind of a fashion. The U.S. ranks, as a matter of perception among business executives, lowest among advanced countries on regulatory protection, that's to say regulatory capture of incumbents. In other words, barriers to entry because of administrative regulations or otherwise. That hurts dynamism and growth. It hurts the little guy, is what that really means. Again, that's not mystical. That is a function of the way we administer our rules and the way our political system works. You can see the land and wealth concentration as well. Then last bit of data, and then I'll close with one or two overarching thoughts, is we know that our health system relative to other countries is relatively weak when it comes to thinking about things from the perspective of social inclusion. But look at the bottom in terms of this fundamental part of redistribution, which is social protection. We are very low in our financial support for social insurance systems, that's to say pensions, unemployment, health, and the like. You can see that the generosity of our public pensions is low compared to other countries. Same thing with the coverage and the benefit rate on the unemployment side, which tends to be administered by states. So I think my basic point here, and you've got the data in front of you, is that the U.S. has many, many strengths. But if we are serious as a country about examining the policy rather than just the politics, just to pick up the theme that Mayor Kenney introduced to us at the very beginning of this session, then we need to, let's look at the data, see where we could do things better, not from in an abstract or general sense, but by looking at what other countries do, at other frameworks. And here's where I'll end. What does all this mean more generally? What we're talking about here, and I am speaking at a Federal Reserve conference, so I'm going to lapse a little bit into economic jargon, if you'll permit me. What we've just gone through is a look at the structural economic policy strengths and weaknesses of the United States. Now that's different from macroeconomic policy. Since the financial crisis, all of the focus, by and large, has been on extraordinary monetary measures to keep the economy afloat, and a great credit is due the Fed and others in this respect, and fiscal policy, because we had to run up our fiscal deficit to 10% of GDP. Fortunately, it's come back down over the last several years as a result of good leadership in the White House and the Congress, down to 2.5% of GDP. But what this country has not done for a generation is to actually have an honest conversation with itself about the relative merits and demerits of structural economic policy. And not just the traditional way of thinking about structural economic policy, with all due respect to my central bank friends here. Traditionally, structural economic policy has tended to look just at the flexibility and efficiency side of the equation. Labor market flexibility, for example. What we've just been talking about here is a new way of thinking, an expanded way of understanding what structural economic policy is. There are dimensions of structural policy that have a very strong bearing on the inclusivity of growth, not just on the top line number of how large the economy grows and how fast it grows, but the bottom line, that is to say how that growth translates into broad-based or median household improvements in income. And these elements that we've just gone through in this framework here, we interpret at the World Economic Forum as effectively a new way, an expanded way of thinking about what countries can do and should do to try to get inclusive growth. If we did this well at the central level, at the federal level, we would make the jobs of our hardworking mayors a lot easier, and a lot of your work at the community level a lot easier. Let me close with one specific illustration of this. Skilling. Every mayor is hard at work trying to connect the graduates of their schools into the workforce. Did you know that the United States spends 1/6 of the amount on skilling and what they call active labor market policies, basically support for people who lose their job because of dislocation, or they need skilling, they need training, but it might not necessarily be a 4-year college degree. We 1/10 of 1% of GDP. These are OECD numbers. We as compared to the average of 0.6%. And for Northern European countries, they spend 1.5%, even up to 2% of GDP in this area. We can't be serious about dealing with trade dislocation and technological disruption if this country is not going to have anywhere near a reasonable degree by international standards of support for our workers to deal with not only adjustment to dislocation, but upskilling over time. Everyone's going to basically, going forward, have to upskill once or twice, at least in their career. With the increased application of robots and algorithms, the effect on both manufacturing and services employment is going to go exactly in that direction. Let me just end with that one final thought, and that is, this is not a political issue in my view. I happen to come from the Democratic Party. Before I've been an international organization person for 15 years now, but before that I used to advise Democrats. But I don't view this, as I go around the world, as a political issue. And certainly not in this country. It should not be viewed as a partisan issue. There's a lot of things for the parties to differentiate their brands about, but this really goes to the heart of the American dream. And we just heard from the mayors that people feel that basically the hope that the next generation will do better than their parents has dissipated or is dissipating. That's not a partisan question. There's nothing more universal than that challenge. Teddy Roosevelt was the first one who started understanding what I've just described to you, that there are things you can do in a range of structural areas of economic policy that basically are better for growth and also better for inclusion. And the reality is that if you trace the line there through the Taft, FDR, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy and Johnson, and even Nixon administrations, these administrations built out our policy and institutions in labor, corporate governance, social insurance, transportation, infrastructure, and the rest. This was a bipartisan effort to build that support structure for our economy so that we have the kind of win-win inclusive growth. We kind of forgot that, I think, and I think there's great potential here to pick it up and learn from the rest of the world and do so. And I thank you very much, Teresa, for giving me an opportunity to talk to the group about it.
So thank you, Rick, and thank you all for staying with us this afternoon. We did have an extended session because we had so much to share this afternoon. We're going to delay the start of our concurrent sessions by about 5 minutes to give you all time to stretch your legs, get something to drink. I also want to remind you all that this evening we're having an evening on the waterfront, which is going to be an outdoor reception. I ask you to please stop by the registration desk if you have not to pick up your envelope, which includes vouchers. We're really trying to highlight the revitalization of the waterfront region here in Philadelphia. So you're going to see an urban park that has been established right outside our hotel doors. And we're going to be highlighting some food trucks, some local food cuisines. So at 4:30, after the close of your next concurrent session, we hope you'll join us out at the Spruce Street Harbor Park, which is, again, right outside the doors of the hotel. Bring your vouchers, and you'll see the food trucks that are participating in our reception this evening. They'll be marked by a bright yellow or red balloon. So we hope you join us, and I want to thank you all for participating in this afternoon's plenary event.